Darius Cole stepped up to the bank counter, sliding his withdrawal slip across the glass. The teller glanced at the amount, her eyes flicking up to him with hesitation. A long pause. Then, instead of processing the transaction, she reached for the phone. Something was wrong. A quiet conversation followed, a few hushed words exchanged between the teller and the manager. Darius watched closely. Their expressions tightened, their voices dropped lower. The manager frowned, shaking her head. Finally, she walked over, her arms crossed. "Sir, we can't approve this withdrawal." Darius raised an eyebrow. "And why is that?" The manager gave a tight smile, her tone forced. "There are security protocols. For certain transactions." The tension in the air was thick. What was really happening here? Before we dive in, tell us, have you ever been denied something that was rightfully yours? Comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more eye-opening stories. Darius Cole held his ground, his expression unreadable. He had walked into this bank expecting a normal transaction, but now something felt off. The manager stood before him, her arms crossed tightly, her polite smile strained. Behind her, the teller shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Darius wasn't just any customer. He was the CEO of this very bank. But today, he had chosen to visit undercover, dressed in casual clothes without his usual security detail, without anyone knowing who he was. He wanted to see how his employees treated everyday customers, and now he was getting his answer. At 45 years old, Darius was one of the most successful businessmen in the country. He had built his wealth from the ground up, investing in businesses that prioritized fairness and customer service. He believed in giving people opportunities, in making sure that everyone, no matter their background, was treated with respect. But standing here now, in the very bank he owned, he was being treated like a suspicious outsider. Lisa Matthews, the bank manager, had been working here for years. She was efficient, professional, and strict about policies. But she also carried assumptions, ones she didn't even realize she had. She was the kind of person who judged clients based on their appearance. In her mind, wealth had a certain look, and Darius, dressed in simple jeans and a jacket, didn't fit that image. The bank itself was a picture of luxury. A sleek glass building, polished marble floors, and gold accents reflecting the warm lighting. Customers moved around, sitting in waiting areas, speaking with tellers or filling out forms at the side desks. Everyone was focused on their own business. But as Lisa stood there, blocking his transaction, a few people started noticing the tension. Darius tapped his fingers lightly against the counter, his patience wearing thin. He had come in as a customer. Now he was being treated like a suspect. Darius kept his eyes on Lisa, the bank manager, waiting for her to explain herself. The hesitation in her voice, the way she crossed her arms, and the way she glanced at the teller. It all told him one thing. She didn't believe he belonged here. Lisa sighed, keeping her tone controlled. "Sir, I just need to verify some details before we process this withdrawal." Darius raised an eyebrow. "I already provided my ID, my account number, and my signature. What else do you need?" Lisa glanced at the teller again, as if looking for backup. The teller shifted uncomfortably. Customers nearby started to notice the tension. A woman sitting in the waiting area lowered her phone, watching closely. A man filling out a deposit slip at the side counter paused, listening. Lisa let out a rehearsed laugh, the kind people use when they're trying to stay polite. "It's just a routine security measure, sir. Large withdrawals require additional verification. Darius didn't move. I understand that. So, are you asking every customer making a large withdrawal to step aside? Or just me? Lisa's smile faltered. She wasn't expecting him to challenge her. She cleared her throat, keeping her voice steady. Sir, I'm just following bank policy. Darius tilted his head slightly. All right, show me the policy. Show me where it says I have to go through additional screening, even after providing my identification. Lisa hesitated. She knew there was no such policy, at least not one that was applied fairly. But before she could respond, the teller, clearly nervous, spoke up. Ma'am, we've processed larger withdrawals before without this much verification. Her voice trailed off when Lisa shot her a sharp look. Darius caught that. He wasn't the problem. Lisa was. The air in the bank grew heavier. A couple standing near the ATM whispered to each other. Another customer, an older gentleman, frowned at the scene unfolding. Lisa exhaled sharply. She needed to regain control. Sir, if you can't comply with the verification process, we won't be able to proceed with this transaction. Darius let out a short laugh. It wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. He knew exactly what was happening here. They saw a black man in casual clothes requesting a large sum of money, and they assumed he was a fraud. He leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but firm. Let me get this straight. You're refusing to give me access to my own money. Money I legally earned. Money I have in an account at this very bank? Lisa straightened her shoulders. Sir, I'm simply trying to protect our clients from potential fraud. Darius's jaw tightened. And which client are you protecting from fraud? Because I am the client. A security guard standing near the entrance noticed the growing tension and took a step forward. Lisa, sensing an opportunity, gestured toward him. Sir, if you continue raising your voice, I'll have to ask security to escort you out. The room went silent. The teller's eyes widened in shock. Customers stopped pretending they weren't watching. The atmosphere shifted completely. Darius's expression remained calm, but something in his gaze changed. He wasn't just a man trying to withdraw money anymore. Now, he was a man who had just been blatantly disrespected in his own establishment. Lisa had no idea what she had just done. The security guard stepped forward, his posture straight and ready. Lisa turned to him, signaling that she wanted Darius removed. But before she could say a word, Darius spoke first. Before you do anything, I'd like you to think very carefully about what's happening right now. His voice was calm, but there was something in his tone that made everyone in the room freeze. The guard hesitated, his eyes flicking between Lisa and Darius. Lisa crossed her arms. Sir, we have policies, and if you're refusing to cooperate, then I have no choice but to ask you to leave. Darius let out a small, humorless laugh. Let me get this straight. I walked in here to withdraw my own money, provided all the identification required, and now, instead of serving me, you're calling security. Lisa stiffened. The customers who had been watching from a distance were no longer pretending to mind their own business. They had seen enough to know that this wasn't about bank policy. It was about something else. Darius took a step forward. His eyes locked onto Lisa. Tell me, do you ask every customer making a withdrawal to step aside? Do you question their identity, call security, and treat them like criminals? Lisa's lips pressed together. She knew she was losing control of the situation. Sir, this isn't personal. It is. Darius cut her off smoothly. It became personal the moment you assumed I didn't belong here. Lisa's face turned red. I don't assume anything. Darius tilted his head. Really? Then tell me, what exactly made you suspicious of me? Lisa opened her mouth, but no words came out. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. The teller, still at her station, looked uncomfortable but finally found her voice. Ma'am, I don't think he did anything wrong. Lisa shot the teller a sharp look. That's enough. Darius nodded slowly. You see? Even your own employee knows this isn't right. Lisa's jaw clenched. Sir, I was just following procedure. Darius smirked. I know every single policy in this bank. I know that nothing about what you did today follows proper banking procedures. Lisa's eyes narrowed slightly. And how exactly do you know that? Darius reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and made a single call. Lisa folded her arms, still convinced she had the upper hand. Then the bank doors swung open. 2 men in tailored suits stepped inside. Their presence alone commanded respect. They walked straight to Darius, ignoring everyone else. Mr. Cole, sir, is there a problem? One of them asked, his voice sharp and professional. Lisa's face lost its color. Darius turned to her with an unreadable expression. Lisa, let me introduce you to my executive team. Gasps rippled through the bank. The customers who had been watching were now in complete shock. Lisa took a step back. What? Darius slowly slid his hands into his pockets, keeping his gaze steady. I own this bank. Lisa's body went rigid. The silence in the room was deafening. Darius let his words sink in. And today, I learned exactly how my customers are treated when I'm not around. Lisa's breath hitched. Mr. Cole, I didn't know. If I had known. Darius raised a hand, cutting her off. That's the problem, Lisa. You shouldn't have to know who I am to treat me with respect. Lisa's hands shook slightly. She had spent years working her way up in the banking world, and now, in one moment, everything she had built was collapsing. Darius finally turned to the security guard. Did I ever raise my voice? Did I cause any disturbance? The guard shook his head. No, sir. Darius then turned back to Lisa. And yet, you called security on me. Lisa tried to find an excuse, anything to justify her actions, but nothing came. Darius sighed. This could have been a simple transaction, but instead you turned it into something it never should have been. The weight of his words settled over Lisa like a storm cloud. She had just made the biggest mistake of her career. The customers, who had witnessed everything, watched in silence, knowing they had just seen justice unfold in real time. Lisa's face was ashen. She knew that whatever happened next, she wouldn't be walking away from it easily. Lisa stood frozen, her lips slightly parted, unable to process what had just happened. The man she had dismissed, the customer she had humiliated, was the very owner of the bank she worked for. Darius didn't look angry. He didn't raise his voice or show any outward frustration, and somehow that made the moment even more terrifying. The 2 executives standing beside Darius watched Lisa with unreadable expressions. They had seen enough. Darius finally broke the silence. Lisa, let's talk about your policies. Lisa swallowed hard. Sir, I was just trying to protect the bank from fraud. We have security measures. Darius tilted his head slightly. Security measures. He turned to one of the executives. Tell me, in the last 6 months, how many white customers have been asked to verify their identity before withdrawing funds? The executive didn't even need to check. None, sir. A gasp rippled through the room. Customers who had been watching in stunned silence exchanged glances, realizing just how deep the bias ran. Lisa's hands clenched into fists. That's not true. Darius raised a hand. Then let's check the records. The other executive, already ahead of him, had pulled out a tablet. A few taps, a few swipes, and the truth was right there, in data that couldn't be denied. In the last year, minority customers were flagged for extra security measures at nearly 5 times the rate of white customers. Lisa's face drained of color. Darius turned back to her, his tone steady but firm. This wasn't just about me, Lisa. It never was. It's about how you and your team have been treating customers who don't fit your idea of wealthy. Lisa's breath came shorter. The weight of what she had done was finally sinking in. One of the customers, an older black man who had been quietly watching from the waiting area, spoke up. So that's why I always have trouble withdrawing my money here. Another woman, a Latina business owner, shook her head. I knew something felt off. Every time I come in, I get questioned like I don't belong. Whispers spread through the bank. The truth was out, and there was no hiding from it now. Darius let the silence sit for a moment before speaking again. You didn't just deny me access to my money, Lisa. You exposed a culture of discrimination happening in my own bank, and that is unacceptable. Lisa's legs felt weak. She had just ruined her career. Darius looked at his executives. Effective. Immediately, I want a full audit of this branch's customer service practices. Every complaint, every flagged transaction, every questionable security measure, I want it all on my desk. The executives nodded, already preparing for the investigation. Darius turned back to Lisa one last time. You were so concerned about security, but in reality, you were the biggest liability in this room. Lisa felt her stomach drop. She knew what was coming next. Darius glanced toward the exit. You're dismissed, Lisa. Your employment at this bank is officially terminated. Lisa staggered slightly. The words hit her harder than she expected, but she didn't argue. She knew she had lost. As she walked out of the bank, customers and employees watched in silence. Some felt justice had been served. Others simply shook their heads, knowing this moment would be remembered for a long time. Darius exhaled slowly. His job here was not over. There were still changes to be made, policies to fix, and customers who needed reassurance that this bank would do better. And it would. Starting today. Lisa walked out of the bank, her head down, her face pale. Moments ago she had stood tall, convinced she was in control, but now her entire career had collapsed in a matter of minutes. Darius watched her go, then turned back to the room. The energy inside the bank had shifted. People were no longer just watching. They were questioning. Customers whispered amongst themselves. Employees exchanged uneasy glances. What had just happened wasn't just about one incident. It was about a culture that had been allowed to thrive unchecked. Darius let out a slow breath. This wasn't how he had expected the day to go. He had come in to observe, to see how his employees treated everyday customers. He never imagined he'd be the one targeted. but maybe it was exactly what needed to happen. He looked at the bank employees, most of whom now stood silently, their faces tense with uncertainty. He wasn't here to fire an entire staff, but he needed them to understand what had just taken place. He stepped forward, his voice firm but calm. "Let's get something straight. What happened today was unacceptable, and if it happened to me, it means it's been happening to others." No one spoke, but he saw a few people lower their heads, guilt flickering in their eyes. Darius continued, "I built this bank on the foundation of fairness. Our policies exist to protect our customers, not to exclude them. What I witnessed today wasn't about security, it was about bias, and I will not allow that to continue." The teller who had spoken up earlier, the one who had tried to subtly defend him, hesitated before raising her hand. "Mr. Cole, sir, I've seen things like this happen before." Darius turned his attention to her. "Go on." She swallowed hard but continued. "It's not just today. There have been times when minority customers have been questioned more than others. Some managers justify it as a precaution, but I don't think that's what it really is." Murmurs spread among the staff. Some nodded in quiet agreement. Others looked away. Darius nodded slowly. "That changes today." He turned to his executive team, standing at attention. "I want a full-scale review of our customer service and security protocols, not just at this branch, but at every single location." One of the executives, a man in his 50s, spoke with a sharp nod. "Already in motion, sir." Darius turned back to the employees. "For those of you who uphold our values, you have nothing to worry about. But for anyone who believes they can treat customers differently based on assumptions, consider this your warning." The weight of his words settled over the staff. A few employees visibly relaxed, while others shifted uncomfortably, realizing the days of unchecked discrimination were over. A woman from the waiting area, an elderly customer who had been watching the entire ordeal, suddenly spoke up. "Mr. Cole, I just want to say thank you." Darius turned toward her, his expression softening. "For what?" She smiled sadly. "For standing up for us. People like me. We've had to deal with things like this for years, and no one listens. Today, you made them listen." A quiet round of agreement rippled through the customers. More voices chimed in, sharing their experiences. Darius felt something shift inside him. Today wasn't just about a bad manager. It was about people who had suffered quietly for too long. He walked over to the woman and gently took her hand. "No one should have to fight for basic respect. And I promise you, I'll do everything in my power to make sure this never happens again." The woman squeezed his hand, her eyes glistening with gratitude. "You already have." Darius straightened, turning back to his executives. "Make sure every bank under my name knows. Change isn't coming. Change is here." The staff stood in stunned silence. The customers watched with admiration. And Darius? He had walked into this bank as an undercover customer, but he was leaving as a man on a mission. This was just the beginning. Darius walked out of the bank, the weight of the moment still settling in his chest. He had come here expecting a simple visit, but instead he uncovered a deep-rooted issue that had gone unchecked for too long. As he stepped outside, he took one last look through the glass windows. Inside, employees whispered among themselves, customers exchanged knowing glances, and the reality of what had just happened was sinking in. Change wasn't just coming, it had already begun. He exhaled, feeling a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about him. It was about every person who had ever been denied, humiliated, or dismissed because of someone else's assumptions. Things were going to be different now. What do you think? Have you ever faced discrimination in a place where you should have been treated fairly? How would you have reacted in Darius's position? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story made you think, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more eye-opening stories. Your voice matters, and together, we can create real change. Thank you for watching, and remember, respect should never be a privilege. It should be a given. See you in the next story.